Today we're looking at the multiplication table. Let's start by looking at some basic number sequences. In the top row we have the ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In the second row we have the twos. We're skipping every other number, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. A multiplication table is a visual way to show all the multiplication facts from 1 to 12. For example, we can find the answer to problems such as 5 times 2 by using rows and columns. Rows run left to right. Look at the arrow pointing to the 5. That is the 5 row. Columns run top to bottom. Look at the arrow pointing to the 2. That is the 2 column. We start by finding the row that begins with 5 and the column that begins with 2. Then we look for the number where the row and column meet. The answer is 10. 5 times 2 is 10. The two numbers multiplied are factors. The answer to the problem is the product. We can switch the row and the column. Look at the row that begins with 2 and the column that begins with 5. If we follow them to where they meet, the product is also 10. We call this the commutative property of multiplication. Changing the order of factors does not change the product. This is true for any two numbers that are multiplied. Another property of multiplication that we can use is the property of zero. Notice that the product of 0 and any number is 0. 1 times 0 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. A third property of multiplication that we can use is the identity property of multiplication. Notice that the product of 1 and any other factor is the other factor. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 10 is 10. 1 times 12 is 12. So let's review the properties of multiplication. We've got the commutative property, a times b is equal to b times a. An example would be 9 times 2 is the same as 2 times 9. We have the identity property, 1 times a equals a. An example is 1 times 5 equals 5. We have the zero property, 0 times a equals 0. An example is 0 times 100 is 0. The point is, the letters a and b can be any two numbers. It's time for some practice, but let's try one together. 5 times 5. We find the 5 row and we find the 5 column. We follow them to where they meet. The answer is 25. 5 times 5 is 25. Now pause the lesson and do A, B, C, and D. Then restart the lesson. Let's try another one together. 8 times 6. We find the 8 row. We find the 6 column. We follow them to where they meet. The answer is 48. Now pause the lesson and do E, F, G, and H. Then restart the lesson. Let's try one more together. 9 times 3. We find the 9 row. We find the 3 column. They meet at 27. 9 times 3 is 27. Now pause the lesson and do I, J, K, and L. Then restart the lesson. These are your last 3 practice problems. Pause the lesson and finish the practice set.